Coming up in today's IdeaSpace podcast.
Practice and preparation. When you're practicing your pitch or your spiel, stick your phone in the corner, prop it up, record yourself. No one else has to see it. And then slow down 10 to 15%. Feel and experience the difference it makes. One of the things we'll often do if we're helping a company with a funding round is to trigger some media coverage beforehand. So when they pitch to the investors have already seen them in the media and they think, and you pretty much won the battle before you start.
Welcome to the IdeaSpace podcast. I'm Ben Hartley, head of IdeaSpace. IdeaSpace is a community of entrepreneurs, founders and their teams, many of them working alongside each other in one of our 3 offices based in and around Cambridge. Our members share knowledge, experience and expertise to help themselves and others in their high-impact venture creation. In this Business Basics episode, we're chatting with the wonderful Simon Hall about communication. Simon is an author, a columnist, a business and communications coach, a lecturer and mentor at the Judge Business School, and on top of all of that, he's the director at Creative Warehouse, a business communications, media, public relations and design agency based in Cambridge. Simon spent the early part of his career, all 22 years of that, as a BBC News correspondent covering all manner of stories all over the world. He then took his experience in media and communication and has fashioned a second career, helping people in business with anything from their core value proposition to pitches and presentations, from PR to website and social media. While Simon has worked with anyone from a small company to a global corporation, he loves to help startups and early-stage entrepreneurs with all their communications support services. And on top of all of that, Simon is also a successful author, with a published series of non-fiction business support books, as well as over 8 novels in the TV detective series. This episode will be packed full of advice and hints and tips for anyone needing to communicate clearly and effectively, whether that be for themselves or their organisations. This episode is one you really won't want to miss. Simon, thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to IdeaSpace and the IdeaSpace podcast. You've got a really interesting and varied background, which I'd love to touch on in a bit. But I thought it'd be really good just to sort of dive in straight away with a really common problem that many early stage founders face, and that's their message and the clarity of their message. And in some of our previous podcasts, I've had founders of successful companies and CEOs come back and tell us that something that they've always struggled with early on is how to actually describe what it is that they're selling and what it is that they do. Why do you think that's such a problem for the early stage founders?
I think they're simply too clever, Ben. We have people who are wonderfully, brilliantly intellectual, particularly at this university and beyond. They come up with brilliant innovations, they do terrific research, they have amazing ideas, and their brains are so high-powered, I think they struggle to bring them down to the sort of level that people need to be able to simply, straightforwardly, and hopefully, interestingly, understand what's being offered. And so my services, myself and my company, what we do, I like to think of us as a dumb-down filter. You pour all the brilliant stuff into me and we will dumb it down by about 98%, pick out the bits that sparkle and shine and allow the audience to grab onto them, understand them and immediately be engaged by them.
And do you think there's a problem, maybe more, I don't want to say engineers and scientists and start sort of focusing in on anyone, but there does seem to be an issue also that when you have someone who's a technical specialist, they talk about the product and maybe all the different facilities that you have, or the different functions that this has, and they don't, and you still don't actually know what it does.
Yeah, that is a common problem. I wouldn't say it is just the scientists and the engineers, but obviously they do speak in a language which is very difficult for most people to understand. And actually, you've touched on a really important point, and this is the first thing I always say: don't tell me how clever your innovation is. Tell me how it benefits me. And absolutely the gold standard for these things, the case study which I always cite, is the iPod. And it's good timing because we've just learned that the iPod is to be gloriously retired from service because, of course, phones can now hold all the music you ever want in the world. But wind your mind back 10 years plus to when the iPod first came out. What's the problem the iPod is solving? The problem is everybody loves music. You want music on the go. The solutions at that point were walking around with a ghetto blaster on your shoulder, boom, 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 or having your Sony headphones on, or whatever it was, having your Walkman on. But it wasn't convenient, it wasn't easy, it wasn't straightforward. And then along comes the iPod. And there's brilliant technology in it. It's got MP3 and it's got this amount of storage capacity. And the engineering and the science behind it is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But did Apple sell it on that? No, they didn't. What they sold it on was in just a few words why you would be interested. And it was beautiful and it was wonderful and it was a slam dunk of a success. They sold it on 1,000 songs in your pocket. That was their tagline. It's their value proposition, actually, because it's problem and solution. 1,000 songs in your pocket. So forget the technology. I'm not interested in that. Why should I care? Why do I benefit from this? Everybody got that immediately. Who doesn't want 1,000 songs in their pocket to listen to on the train or on the tube or on the bus or walking or when you're out exercising? Slam dunk success. And I'm not saying it was all down to that, because, of course, it's great technology, great visionary stuff. That's Apple. However, the way they explained it, so simple, yet so effective, so beautiful, so engaging, so inspiring, so makes you want to be a part of it. That was such an important part of their story.
And it's funny because I don't even remember having known that, but as soon as you said it, I did remember it as that, 1,000 songs in your pocket. And so when you work with early stage companies, and you having to do this dumbing down, what's the sort of first thing that you might do in order to try and get that?
First thing I do is sit down with the innovators, the entrepreneurs, and say, tell me what you do. And standard, they'll give me 15, 20 minutes of talk, and then I'll say, tell me what you do. And then we'll get it down to a couple of minutes. And then I'll say, what I want you to do now is to sum up what you do in a paragraph. And they'll tell me, oh, I can't do that. A paragraph about what we do. I said, yeah, you can, because we're not going any further on this journey until you do that. So they complain and grumble and sweat, but then they sum it up in a paragraph. And then we have a little play with that. And then I say, now sum it up in one line, 9 words maximum. And that is your headline value proposition. And at that point, believe me, they really malfunction. That is absolutely impossible with all the brilliant technology. And then I cite the example of something like the iPod and say, really, if they can sum up that technology with 1,000 songs in your pocket, don't tell me you can't sum up yours. And the key to it is not the smartness of what you've come up with, it's the value it offers me. So it's always starting off with that core message, that headline value proposition that grabs the attention in a second. And the parallel, Ben, is, my background in the media and news and the BBC. It's the headline for a newspaper, or the headline that you would use in a radio bulletin or a TV news program. I don't know if you know, but what do you think the most experienced, the most talented journalists in a newsroom, what job do you think they're usually given? Are they the news editors? Are they the producers? Are they presenters or the reporters? What do you think the most talented ones tend to end up doing? I'll put you on the spot here, haven't I?
Yeah, put me on the spot.
I mean,
I also don't want to say the wrong one in case. Gosh, that's a good point. I don't know.
The answer is the people who write the headlines.
Right.
Because you might have the most brilliant news program going, but if the headlines aren't right, if you don't hook people in from the start, it's wasted, because no one's listening, no one's watching, no one's reading. So the headlines are absolutely critical. So when I start with a business, let's get the headline or the core value proposition, like that 1,000 songs in your pocket, like with Creative Warehouse, all your communication problems solved with style. We don't talk about our experience to start with, and we don't talk about how we use the inverted pyramid structure and all that sort of thing. We talk about how we add value. That's always where you start. The headline is the hook, and from there, everything else follows.
Great. And it's almost like that with press releases and things. Anything that you get the first line out first of what it is you want to say, and then you can delve down in each separate paragraph or sentence. You can expand, but the first one is the thing that catches you.
It's critical. I mean, the modern world is so busy. You know what it's like. We were sitting here setting up. You've got to turn off your Slack and your email and your text messages and your WhatsApp and all that sort of stuff. Do you know, I shouldn't put you on the spot again, but because you squirmed so nicely last time, and I wish the people listening to this could have seen your expression, because it was I'm going to get you later expression. So I'm going to take advantage and do that again. Do you know what the average modern attention span is in this busy world of ours?
Good Lord. It's probably just in the seconds in terms of, I can imagine Yeah, I can imagine it's in the seconds and not in the minutes.
But I'll going back to my old BBC days. I'm going to pin you down like you're a squirming politician. Let me push you on that. Let me press you. What do you say? What's your answer?
My attention span. Well, mine is pretty.
But is that typical?
My children's even less. Oh gosh, it's probably about 20 or 30 seconds.
A little bit low. It's about 10 seconds, 7 to 10 seconds.
Right.
It's that short. But if you think about your life, what's coming at you all the time? Messages are coming in. Someone wants to have a word with you. The phone's ringing. Your email's going off. Your Twitter's pinging. Attention spans are really short. So that headline, that core value proposition is absolutely critical. Always think about it. Someone's scrolling through social media. Scroll. You've got to make them stop with that headline that you've written, go, ooh, and then click on, expand, find out more. So you're absolutely right. Headline is critical.
And in terms of the founders sort of creating a message or a number of messages, should they be thinking of different ones for different people? So if they've got a headline for their consumer, is that different as a tagline or something? Is there something that they tell their customer? Would they have a different one for an investor or a different one for the media? Or
Yes, you would. Yes, you absolutely would. Always. One of the keys of communications is to think about who are you talking to. In fact, the two fundamentals, what you're saying, who you're saying it to. So, for example, if it was an investor, you would angle it more to, this is a huge market and here's a massive opportunity because we're going to bust it right open with our innovation. If it was the mass media, you're trying to get publicity, and that's one of the things. I'll give you one of the tricks in our playbook. One of the things we'll often do if we're helping a company with a funding round is to trigger some media coverage beforehand. So when they pitch to the investors have already seen them in the media and they think, and you pretty much won the battle before you start. So yes, you always think about who you're talking to. So if it's the general public and the media, you would say why this is important to the general public rather than the financial benefits which an investor might get. So yeah, always think about what am I saying? Who am I saying it to?
You mentioned the media as well, and getting them on board early. How does one even start that? Because for myself, you see the media as something not untouchable. It's something that you react with or
I wouldn't want to touch it. Yeah,
no, exactly. Yeah, some of them.
I got out of it. I've cleaned up.
You wouldn't want to go anywhere near some of them. You're reacting or interacting with them all the time. But if someone said, right, contact someone in the media and get some... how do you even start that as an early stage founder?
Well, first of all, think about your message. What have I got to offer? Why would they be interested? So be strategic about it. Why would this media outlet be interested? Think about who you want to talk to. I'll give you an example with an agricultural tech company I've worked with since they started. They were going through a funding round. We triggered some media coverage, which was in the sort of business press. It went very well. We also pushed it out to the tech, agriculture and tech press. They took it as well. So not only did they get the investment, they also got more customers actually around the world because they looked at these websites. So first of all, what am I saying? And this bunch, they're great because they can help with fruit farmers estimating their yield much more accurately, which means they can make much more profit, which means they can use much less chemicals and much less work on their actual fields and their orchards. So it's very, very good for the farmers, pitching, very, very good for the environment, which was a message we played particularly in the media because obviously it's a huge concern at the moment, and it's a great investment opportunity as well. So yeah, think about what you've got to say, be really clear on what you've got to say, why anyone should be interested, the headlines, the core value propositions, and then think about who you want to send this to. Does it want to go into the business press for investors? Does it want to go into the specialist press in your area, whether it is agri-tech, whether it is health, whether it is whatever it is? Find them, look at them up online. All the media have their contact details online. Stories are the lifeblood of the industry. Journalists actually want to hear from you. If you can put together a decent news release, the journalists will have a look at it, and you stand a good chance of landing media coverage, and it can have enormous benefits, absolutely enormous.
So they can literally just, once they found who they think it is that they should be telling their story or sharing their story, they can just literally find them online and find contact details.
Yeah, it really is as simple as that, and it's absolutely worthwhile doing because the analogy I always make is you can take a lot of time and burn a lot of shoe leather and burn up a lot of energy by going out looking for customers. But get your story in the media, like I did with the agri-tech company, and you turn the equation round. Suddenly the customers are coming to you, asking for your services. That is such a big difference. Saves all the selling. You're pretty much there before you even set off. So yeah, it's very worth doing.
Can I touch on something else, just separating almost the founder from what it is that they're doing, or their company or their startup? I see it sometimes that the founders don't see themselves as an important part of the brand or the message, when in fact a lot of investors are investing in the founder as much as they are the company, the idea. How do early stage founders and even small business owners, how do they set themselves up as a personal brand? Where do they start with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and you make a very important point. When we invest in people and they pitch to us, of course we buy into your innovation. Of course, you've got nothing without that. But we also look at you as well. Do I like you? Do I trust you? Are you the sort of person who, when the first hit comes, you're going to fold and give up? Or are you going to do what you need to do as an entrepreneur and walk through walls? I don't care what comes at me. This is going to happen. I'm going to make it work. Well, I would recommend what I think of as one of the most beautiful, effective, elegant, but somehow sadly neglected areas of communication for a founder to get their personal message across, and that is the art of storytelling. Storytelling is often neglected. Now, I see you smile there, and I'm interested to know that. I'm going to turn the interview around again. Why
it's funny, I'm
smiling
because I'd written down, I've got a couple of notes here, and I'd written down, not just for this part about personal branding, but I just put, is it all about storytelling? ? Because I think you're right. I think, especially when it could be an investor or it could be a consumer with so many different companies and products out there, you've got to resonate with something. And we do love stories, don't we? I mean,
they're one of the foundations of our lives. And again, I'll ask you a question because I'm mischievous like that. Do you know what percentage of our everyday conversations, research tells us, are stories? I am so mean, aren't I?
No, not at all. No, it's great. It's great to get my get the old grey matter moving.
I'm thinking of the regular listeners who think it's normally Ben who asks the question. This horrible guy's come and turned it round. He's been really mean to nice Ben.
God, the percentage of things that we talk about, stories, or maybe 50%.
Yeah, it's about 70%. Wow. And you think about your life. You'll go home this evening and you'll probably say to your family, blimey, I had an extraordinary time with this idiot I got in on my podcast today. And you'll tell the story about some of the things that we talked about. Or you might go out and talk to some of your colleagues here and say, I've got this great idea for something I saw and this is why, and you'll tell a story about it. Stories are one of the foundations of our lives. And there's so much research on stories, but what really strikes me about them is they stimulate the production of oxytocin in the brain, the happy hormone, the one that makes us fall in love. And the other extraordinary thing is, and think about this, you'll have experienced it as well. You go to the cinema, you read a book, there's an action sequence, maybe a James Bond type fight. You start punching and feeling and kicking with it as well. They actually light up your brain and they stimulate your body to play along. That's what stories do. And I could give you so many examples of storytelling, but specifically for founders, everybody I've ever worked with as entrepreneurs or founders has a reason for doing what they're doing. And they're always a little shy to put that in to a pitch or a presentation. Maybe because they think they should be on numbers and market available size and how we're going to get into it and all that stuff, which of course is part of your story when you're pitching. However, I always say to them, let's get the story out of you. Because you imagine a day and there are perhaps 5 or 6 pitches. It's always the one who tells the story who gets remembered. And I'll give you another challenge. When you go and see people present, they'll do their presenting and it'll be perfectly fine and they'll go through all their facts and details and the analysis that you need. But you watch what happens with the audience when someone tells a story. Everyone goes quiet and they lean forward and they engage. It's remarkable. And if we've got time, I'll tell you a couple of stories, but I'll give you one, which I sometimes cite as an example. I work with a wonderful entrepreneur called Sheila, and Sheila has set up a company called Boutros Bear. And Boutros Bear provide help for people who have had cancer, come through treatment, and are rebuilding their lives. Obviously traumatic, obviously a long way to go. And when she pitches Boutros Bear, which I'm really happy to say is now a great success, she pitches it as, these are the number of people you're talking to. Companies need to support them. This is the burden on the health service. This is the amount of available market. There are big figures. There's a really big business case for helping people who've come through cancer. But the key part of her presentation is when you come to the why she set this company up. Going back 5 years, she was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. She had 2 young children. It was looking very touch and go. But Sheila, I'm proud to have as a friend because she's wonderful, but she's also a fighter. So she fought her way through it, through the aggressive treatment, came out the other end and realised there was a huge gap for support, whether it's fitness, whether it's nutrition, whether it's emotional, mental health and well-being. So she, being wonderful and so spirited, actually set up her own programs on those areas for herself. She got better, I'm pleased to say, and then she realised, of course, there's an opportunity both for a great business and to help perhaps millions of people when they've come out of this terrible illness, looking to rebuild their lives, needing support, help, guidance. That's what her business does. Now, what do you think makes the impact? All the facts and figures, or her telling you that story about her personal fight with cancer and why she set this business up?
And even, I found myself in even you relating the story, sitting forwards and being drawn right into that because it is the story. You didn't tell me about the number of the facts and figures of the numbers of the business, etc. So that's really interesting. And you mentioned the pitching side of things. I know that you often help people with their pitches and presentations as well. Can I just ask also about tips and advice on pitches and presentations? I know we could have done an hour and we wouldn't even scratch the surface with it. But just a few hints and tips which will help a lot of the listeners who will be preparing a pitch to an investor or even trying to get a co-founder on board and they want to present what it is that they're doing. So there's one thing about talking to one-on-one or 1-2, but when the room gets a little bit bigger, a lot of people get quite fearful and nervous of public speaking. And if you're not experienced at that, are there any tips to help? Yeah,
there's a golden secret of public speaking and presentations, which is the golden secret of so many things in life, and that is simply practice and preparation. It's the old story. The only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. Now, that's a quotation which has got many people who have claimed to have originated it, but it's absolutely true. And there are so many versions of that. So practice. I'm a strong believer in hard work. Practice and preparation is really important. But again, I'll ask you a question. When it comes to a presentation, a pitch for investment, what do you think is the most important part of that presentation?
I find when I'm listening to it is actually understanding what it is I'm about to listen to and having, sort of an introduction so I'm aware of what it is that I'm about to hear and it clarifies my mind.
Basically, you're talking about a hook, aren't you? So it's the start. Again, going back to what we discussed about short attention spans, quite often if someone's pitching, there'll be one of several that day. You got to make the audience go, great, oh, this is interesting, rather than, oh, blimey, another presentation. So the start is absolutely critical. In the start, make sure you set out your story in the first few seconds, the 10-second window that we've discussed. Give a sense of you as well, your character. That really helps. And make us want to find out more. And I sometimes use analogies with, actually, curiously enough, pop lyrics, because I used to be a DJ when I was in the BBC, or before I became a serious news correspondent. And if you're going to put a microphone in front of me, you're going to get the old DJ voice. Sorry about that. So it's really important to get the start right. And the parallels I use are great literature. I mean, you, being an erudite, educated and intellectual man, would know you should have seen the expression at home at that point. You will know a famous novel that begins with these words: "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." Name that book. You're going to absolutely kill me after this, aren't you? I thought you were romantic. I had you down as a romantic, you see. Oh, I'm in trouble. Shall I tell you? Save your squirms.
No, because once you tell me, I'll be like, oh, I was thinking.
Victorian, one of the most famous of the romantic novels.
Go on. Just.
I mean, you've got a lot in common with the male lead character. Handsome, charming.
Oh, it's not yet. Go on.
Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, Pride. Oh, yes.
No one heard that.
Oh, him. Yes.
No one heard that
Prejudice.
stage whisper at home, did they? I just had you down as a Mr. Darcy then, which I saw. It made you sit up. I thought, yes, I could see that. Yes. Well, that's the opening of Pride and Prejudice. If you look at that opening, it's a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Straight to the heart of the story, first of all. You know immediately it's not a crime, it's not a thriller, it's a romance story. Single man, want of a wife. Second, in only 20 or so words, Jane Austen immediately gives you a sense of her character. She's got that beautiful observer's eye and the writer's ability to translate a universal truth into just a few words. Brilliant. So she's someone who's interesting, a character, her character. And then when you read an opening like that, do you then stick the book away and think, oh, I'm not going to read on? It makes you want to find out more. So those three elements for the opening line of any presentation. Straight to the heart of your story. If I was pitching Creative Warehouse, I might stand in front of an audience and say, we're going to solve all your communication problems with style and a smile. And in just, 10 or so words? Straight to the heart of our story. This is what we do. Style, because I'm lucky to have a great team working with me who keep me on the relatively straight and narrow. And the style and smile is a sense of my character. I don't do things boringly. I like to work with people I like. We like to have fun. We do the business, but we have fun as well. Okay? So those 3 points. Straight to the heart of your story. Sense of your character, whether it's your passion, your pride, your warmth, your intellect, whatever it is, make us want to find out more. And by all means, introduce yourself. Of course, I would say, we'll solve all your communication problems with style and a smile. I'm Simon Hall, Director of Creative Warehouse. Introduce yourself, but do it in the second line. Because, with all due respect, your name is not going to be the most important thing about what you're going to be presenting. So, straight from the start, get your story in there, sense of you, make us want to find out more. That's critical in presenting. And if you can get off to a good start, you will feel so much better. So much better. You're growing confidence and the presentation is more likely to go well.
Great. Oh, that's excellent advice. And what about for people, and this is, I guess, similar, not exactly the same, for people who are introverted? A lot of this is about networking. We hear again in podcasts and feedback from alumni, etc., that the networking is really important. But for introverts, how do they not capture a room, but how do they show off without showing off? Because a lot of people don't like to sound like they're blowing their own trumpet. Are there any? What are your thoughts on that? Any tips
that's a very good question. It's interesting. It's a cultural thing as well, because if we were doing this in America, a bit more showing off would be expected and encouraged. But here, of course, we mustn't talk about that. I don't want to talk about all my brilliance, but you've got to a little bit, because you've got to convince your audience. Fact-based is very, very helpful. So you'll have your analysis, you'll have your details. Show that you're on top of this subject. Of course, we want that if we're going to work with you or buy into you, of course. The storytelling helps with your character. It brings out your character. So get your story in, whatever it is about why you're doing what you're doing, how you can help people. And then think about the other tricks you can use. There are a couple of tricks that I use. One is probably my favorite, and because it's you, I'm going to give it away here. This trick can make you so much more authoritative in your presentation. It can really command respect. It can keep the audience engaged. It can also help with your voice projection, with your dealing with nerves, and it's really, really simple to do. What do you think I'm going to say it is?
Well, you're pausing quite a lot when you're saying it, which is it's giving you real authority. Well, you've got authority because clearly you're damn good at what you do, but yeah, the pausing and the speed and is it cadence of your voice?
It's all that. Yeah, I say to people, how do you feel when you go and present? And believe me, I've done a few of these now. I get nervous as well. Even when I went on BBC News, God knows how many times, if I was on the air, I'd be nervous. If I present now, I'll be nervous. Why? Because nerves are a natural part of what we do to prepare ourselves for a big moment. They get the blood flowing, the electricity in the veins, the energy, the adrenaline. It's natural. So first of all, embrace them. They're there for a reason, but you need to control them. And the golden secret, I think, to really help is to just slow down. 10-15%. And it will feel to you a little alien because it's not what you're used to. But to your audience, to give them the space to digest those important words you've just said, to give you time to get air into your body, to keep you on top of your subject, and also so you can work out what's coming next sometimes. It's really, really helpful. And if you don't believe me, practice and preparation. When you're practicing your pitch or your spiel, stick your phone in the corner, prop it up, record yourself. No one else has to see it. And then slow down 10 to 15%. Feel and experience the difference it makes. You will never go back. And the other thing it really helps with, it gets rid of the ums and ers, removes the redundancies.
That's me. That's me, 100%. There you go. That's just excellent advice, and I love it. There's so many sort of nuggets of information there, and super sound bites, which isn't surprising given your past. But that's what I'd like to ask you a bit about, because it's really interesting. People will know that you're a journalist, a writer, a broadcaster, etc. Can you tell us a bit about your time at the BBC and how did that come about? And
wow, that is a broad question.
It is, it is broad.
But it's a very good question. How did I come about being in the Beeb? Well, it does go back a bit to DJing, and I'm not going to do that again for you. But when I went to university, I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I thought I might want to be a teacher, because I've always hugely respected teachers. So I read sciences, maths, physics, chemistry. And when I was at university, as one of my little recreations, I thought I should grace the world by being on the university radio station, partly because I've always loved music, but also mainly because I love the sound of my own voice. So I started DJing, and it turned out I had a reasonable talent for spinning the platters of matter on the wheels of steel, banging out the big ones and hurling out the hits. No more impersonations of me, but I really was like that. It was awful. Anyway, it turned out I had the gifts you need for being a DJ, which is the ability to talk hours of nonsense, which, as you've noticed, I can do fine, and also the knowledge of music. So I then started DJing in local nightclubs, and quickly worked out this was a splendid way of life, because you were given free beer, you were paid, you did a few hours work, and you got lots of money. And also, to be frank between us, you got quite, girls sort of looked at you in the way that, having seen what I look like, they wouldn't normally look at you, to be quite frank. So, I have authority, I have respect. Well, this is splendid. So I did some DJing, and then I did some DJing on the local radio as well, and that was well paid, and that was fun too. And I started to realise there was a career in this stuff. So I did some DJing, and then I got a bit bored with that, because it is slightly limited what you can say about records. And then I went into the newsroom, and then from there I joined the BBC as a trainee, and initially in radio. And I think I was right for radio, because I probably got the right sort of looks for radio. But the BBC obviously recognised my star quality, my Tom Cruise type looks, and they put me into TV. And from there I was lucky enough to travel all over the place, doing some amazing stories, meeting some remarkable people, and having an extraordinary career. So it was a bit naughty, really, because many people spend years and years trying to get into the BBC and broadcasting, and they don't do it. And I sort of wandered in not really knowing what I was doing, but I'm very glad I did, because it's been a super career.
Yeah. And so obviously going out as a reporting journalist or as a news reporter, you're having to find stories, and I guess a part of communication that's often not overlooked, but you don't think about it straight away. You think about what's coming out your mouth rather than what's coming into your ears. You probably have to listen an awful lot and pick up on things to get the news stories. That probably helps in the way that people project themselves as well.
Yeah, you've nailed one of the most important arts in life, I think, for me, which is the art of listening. The old story goes, you've got one mouth and two ears for a reason. And I think that's absolutely right. And you've realised by now that I'm a compulsive storyteller. So I'll tell you a story, and this is just between you and me. I mean, people at home, don't even worry about this. And it's not about one of my best friends who's not called Steve, okay? So remember that. If you see me out and I'm with someone who's called Steve, it's not him.
It's not
definitely not Steve. So this is the danger of talking too much, but not listening enough. So Steve, who's not called Steve, finally got on a date with a girl he really liked, who he'd been wooing for a while. And he messaged me beforehand saying, I'm actually going out with her tonight. So, of course, I did the friend thing and sent a message back saying, brilliant, oh, she'll love you. Go and have fun, just be yourself. And I thought maybe I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, be yourself. And so I phoned him the next day to find out how he'd got on. He said, "Oh, it was great." I said, "Well, tell me more about it." He said, "Well, I told her all about me and my life and myself and the things I like doing and where I like going and my hobbies and books I've read and films I've watched and the music I like and all that." I said, Great. And what did you find out about her?" "Oh," he said, yeah, not a lot actually." I said, "Oh, okay, all right. So, obviously went well. What happens next?" He said, "Well, that's a weird thing. I've sent her a couple of messages and she hasn't replied." Which I think tells you all you need to know about talking too much and listening too little.
Yeah. And someone, in fact, going back to the networking thing, when you're in a group of people, those that aren't listening, and it's really, it's not just awkward, but it doesn't sort of project oneself in the best way professionally as well.
Why do you want to talk to someone who's just talking at you and not listening? Or they're looking at, that looking over the shoulder moment where they're looking past you for the next person to trap with their spiel. It's really frustrating. I've got a good friend in Cambridge who runs the brilliant marketing meetup called Joe Glover, and he puts it perfectly. He said, "To our events, you come on receive mode, not broadcast mode. So talk to each other." I think that's absolutely right. Listening is critical.
I want to talk about something that is that's not difficult. I know you can't give examples necessarily.
Well, I might,
or maybe you can here.
I might if you beguile me enough.
Yeah. I'm building this up now. But one of the many things that you do alongside obviously helping people with getting their message across, getting their website and their branding, that side of things, and also public speaking and communicating personally as well, is an element of crisis management as well, or what would you call it for PR purposes?
Yeah, it's crisis communication. When something goes kaboom.
And lots of people will, or lots of founders and early stage companies they'll have to announce bad profits, or that the funding round they didn't get it, and at some point you actually have to give bad news or tell bad news. Is there a how does one go about that?
Yeah, it is difficult, and it does come. The answer is really boring, but really important. It's to be honest, open, and have integrity about it, and critically empathy as well. There are a couple of very good case studies. In fact, the one I use when I'm teaching or talking about crisis communications, and I'll play the game I do when I start. If I said to you the company BP, the big oil energy company BP, in the last 10 years or so, what dreadful crisis that they went through would you identify?
Anywhere that there's oil spilt and
you're thinking specifically, I suspect, of the Gulf of Mexico disaster.
Yeah.
So you remember that?
Yes,
okay?
I do, yeah.
Everybody remembers that. When you say to a group of people, "What disaster did BP go through?" They'll say, "Oh, that awful oil spill off America, Gulf of Mexico." Absolutely, it was catastrophic. It was awful. If I said to you Tesco, our biggest grocer Tesco, what catastrophe did they go through in the last 10 years or so? Now, isn't that interesting? You can't spot
that.
That
is really interesting.
And this is what happens. This is what happens. So you remember BP's, but you don't remember Tesco's. And Tesco's is actually more recent.
That's such a good question. And I know that once you tell me, or once I go on.
So if I say the horse meat scandal, remember?
My Lord. Yes.
Horse meat in Tesco lasagnas and burgers. So that came out of nothing.
How can that just disappear?
Because of the crisis comms handling. So look up, if you want to find out more about this, how BP handled the Gulf. It was a disaster, because not only were they polluting this beautiful, beautiful ocean, on top of that, initially they tried to pass the buck. They said, "It's our contractor, it's not our rig." Really? I mean, really? So you've contracted this to happen and it's their fault. That's not going to fly. Then they downplayed it. They kept saying there was far, far less oil than there actually was. They had to be dragged kicking and screaming in front of Congress to get the details out of them. And then they stalled and messed around with trying to make the situation better. And to cap it all, their chief executive, Tony Hayward, then went on television to say, "Listen, we're sorry, we want to deal with this, we want to make it right, because no one wants that more than I do. I want my life back." Men were killed on that rig in that explosion. There was utter outrage with BP because they weren't open, they weren't honest, they didn't show empathy, they didn't show understanding, they didn't deal with it. And the result of that was negative headlines day after day after week after week after month, which is why you remember it. Now look at the horse meat scandal and Tesco. They immediately recognised the size of the problem. They owned it, saying, this is what's happened. They told everybody about it. They gave us the extent of the problem. They owned it. They said, this is how we're dealing with it. We're changing our supply chains. We're only sourcing from here on in. We're going to put a newsletter together. We're going to keep you all updated about how we do it. It's our problem. We're sorting it. We'll deal with it. Open, honest, and transparency. Result, a couple of days of awful headlines, but then forgotten. Compare that with BP, who tried to fight it all the way. So if you've got bad news, okay, it's hard, but it happens. Show empathy. If you're losing people, we're really sad to lose these people, but in order to preserve the company for the future, for all we believe we can do for the world and for our other staff, we have to do so. And we've tried to make it as fair and decent as possible with these people, but we hurt. Own the situation. Try and do your best for them. Be open, honest, and transparent. That's all you can do. And even though people will understand, it's bad news. And of course, that's difficult. You will get respect for handling it in a way which is at least human and at least open and honest.
Yeah, thank you. Social media.
Ooh. You're asking a man of my age about social media.
I know.
What's that then?
I'm exactly the same. Yes. I mean, I was going to, again, this you could have another hour or two even scratching the surface with it. Is that something that you help with, or your company helps with as well? How people manage and use social media?
Yeah.
Because a lot of companies seem to just think, oh God, we're going to have to use social media. So we're going to have the Facebook and the Twitter and the.
Yeah, we do. I am, as you will know, far from a child of the social media age. I'm like a ZX Spectrum kid in an internet world, to be frank.
For those listeners, he looks about 25.
Maybe 28 on a bad day. I'll come back, watch her. Yeah, we do social media, and of course you have to. It's part of the modern communications package. And I think, in fairness, it is important, and it is useful. But it's a double-edged sword. You have to be careful how you use it. You have to think about what you're saying, and you have to have some form of strategy. You also, I think, critically shouldn't spend all your time on it. It seems to be some people who are obsessed with social media and think, we've got to be on this, we've got to be on that, we've got to be saying this or that. Well, no, not really. I post on average 3 or 4 times a week, so probably every other day. I only tend to post when I've got something to say. I always make sure my character comes out in it, which I hope is warm, upbeat, helpful, embracing, supportive. And that's about it for me, really. The art is to be a member of a community. People know what I talk about, which is communication. I support other people when I can. I praise people when I think it's appropriate. And that's really it with social media. But I think
it's interesting, just picking up on a number of times you've talked about just being honest in yourself and showing your character, whether it be in your presentation or the first bit of your pitch or the way that you tell your message on social media. A lot of it is about getting your own honest character out there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is character, and that's why it's called social media. It's social because it's interactive, and you should try and be yourself. And I do this when we're doing a bit more advanced communications with companies. We start off with the core messages and we get the website sorted and all that sort of thing, and photography and videography if they want that, of course. But then we come on to ask, what's the character of your company? And it's often a point which founders will not think about. So, well, what do you mean, what's the character of my company? Your company has a character, same as any person has a character, and it will be what you think it should be. And you contrast, for example, the character of Barclays Bank with the blue, quite conservative, traditionalist colours, typeface. That's the right character for Barclays Bank, because they've got your money. You want them to be trustworthy and traditional and old school. Then you contrast that with, say, Innocent Drinks, which is a classic case study in character. We make healthy drinks and put little hats on top of them, is one of their catchphrases, taglines. Their character is, we do good stuff, we give some of our profits to charity, but we're warm, happy, upbeat, smiley. So think about the character of your company as well, because character can really help you to cut through. I'm not saying Innocent were a success because of their character. They make some good drinks as well, of course, but their character helps them, people respond to it, and they like to be part of a character which appeals to them.
Mm. That leads me on to the brand element. It's hard to describe brand. Don't ask me another question. Don't ask me what I think brand.
I wouldn't dare now.
Explaining what a brand is. But again, they reach the point when the founders of companies or small businesses have to start thinking about not themselves or their company as a brand as opposed to a product or a service. Do you know at what stage that an early stage founder might do that?
That's a good question. It will depend, of course, how busy they are, how the company is growing. If the company grows fast, they'll have to think about it fast. If not, they may have a bit longer. But I would always recommend having it in the back of your mind. What do we want our company not just to do, but to be? Who are we? Is social responsibility a big part of it? Do we offer apprenticeships? Do we donate money to certain causes? How do we do our social media? Does everyone in our company understand who we are? Is someone going to blow it for us by being grumpy on social media when we're really warm and laid back and down with the kids on social media? So it depends when to think about it seriously, i.e. devote time to it. But I think founders should always have at the back of their mind, what is our character? One of the things, it's subtle how you position this, but one of the things I do with Creative Warehouse, and I insist on, and everybody gets in the team, I always say we do not have customers, we have partners. And that's important to me because, to be honest with you, there are people we've turned down working with because they're a bit of a pain and they're high maintenance. And we suggest something and they say, oh no, I don't think that's right. It's like, well, why did you ask us then? We've only got 30 years in terms of communication experience, but you know the type, so they're not worth working with. So by saying we have partners rather than customers, it means when there's a problem, they can phone me up. They won't hesitate to do it. They know we'll be there. That, for me, sums up a lot of the spirit of what our business is, what our brand is.
Because it sounds like it's also it's communicating externally, but also internally, so that the people that work for you and with you also understand. Okay. So the companies there that are growing, it means that I guess everyone having a very strong idea of what the brand is. It makes it much easier to externally and internally communicate. And
it's often said that your staff are your greatest ambassadors, which I think is partly true, but also your customers, in our case our partners, are our greatest ambassadors as well. Staff should know what sort of company they're joining, and if you get it right, the staff should want to join the company a lot because of what the company is. So that's why it's worth thinking about.
Well, thank you very much. You've touched on so many facets of business for these early stage founders or anyone interested in entrepreneurship, got an idea and want to turn it into some commercial venture. There's a lot to think about in terms of communicating, because it's the marketing, it's the PR, it's the personal branding, it's the presenting and pitching. There's all of it is about a message, and it goes back to that storytelling bit. It's about telling a story, or it seems it's about being honest about who you are as a character, and also who the brand is, or what the brand is. It's that has a character. So we've got characters and a story. It's like I like film, so I always think of it in sort of film terms. But there are so many excellent bits of advice and tips and hints and tips and stories, so really appreciate it. I just want to sort of as we close, are there any good books or blogs or article sources that people might...
It's going to sound like a planted question, because my latest book just came out this week, which is on leadership communication. I'm a novelist, which is originally how I started writing. But I wouldn't inflict my novels on our poor listeners.
Come on, you have to...
Well, they're all on my website if you want to see them. But seriously, in terms of what would be useful for people starting out with their communication journey for their business, I would look at the non-fiction books I've written on business communication, which start with accelerating your business through communication deliberately, the ABC, which is pretty much everything you need to think about on the communications front. And then the others that follow that, and more are commissioned to follow. We look at blogs, for example, public speaking and presentations, how to get featured in the media, how to be interviewed by journalists. And I'm currently working on a book about business storytelling. So at risk of being immodest, they are worth looking at, but there are lots and lots of books as well. I would say one thing: do read around all the advice you get, but do also be yourself. The critical thing about all these things, if I said to you, look at these brilliant communicators, Martin Luther King, wow, passion, wow, principles. Then go to another extreme, Margaret Thatcher, cold, steely determination, and perhaps somewhere in the middle, maybe Ronald Reagan, and that avuncular, fireside, chatty type manner. They are three completely different styles of communication, but they all work. They all have worked. Why? It comes back to one word: authenticity. Be what you are, and it'll work much better for your communication and your character and for your company. As Oscar Wilde very wisely said, be yourself, everyone else is already taken.
What a great place to finish. Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we're going to have to get you back because there's so much more we could cover. Simon, thank you so much. One last thing. You mentioned your website. What's the website for anyone?
Have a look at my personal website if you want to know about my books. That's thetvdetective.com, thetvdetective.com. I know you'll ask because you're a perceptive interviewer. The title comes from my first book, which came out, 15 or so years ago. Now, our company warehouse is creative-warehouse.com. And I would also say, if you are a founder, if you are an entrepreneur, if you are working on a startup, go for it. I love working in the sector. I love the energy, the dynamism, the enthusiasm, the way you will change the world. It's a privilege to be a part of. Go for it. And on those days where it's tough, keep going, because there is nothing like it in the world. Good luck to you.
Super. Simon, thank you.
Pleasure.
For more information or any inquiries about joining Ideaspace, please contact us via ideaspace.cam.ac.uk or via any of our social media channels.